motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The officially announced Richardson Hitchins versus George Kambosos super lightweight title fight that I think is a gross misuse of Matchroom's time, of Matchroom's resources, to the point where it's almost negligent to make it, because nobody's asking for this, and we all know how it ends. There are better fights for the both of these fighters to be in than in the ring with each other. And in New York City, of all places, where, despite a Richardson Hitchins being from there, it's not a big draw. George certainly isn't. He's from Australia. George has managed to turn that win over Teofimo Lopez all the way back there in 2021 into several high-profile paydays, but many of them are losses. The two losses to Devin Haney, the knockout loss to Vasyl Lomachenko, the dubious decision in the Maxie Hughes fight. I'm not saying that George isn't a warrior. I'm saying he's a fighter of limited ability, and that is obvious to the boxing community at large. So that when you put him in there with an unbeaten Richardson Hitchins, people aren't going to be excited. And Richardson Hitchins' noticeable enthusiasm to face George, he's never had the energy for, say, Subriel Matias that he keeps for George Kambosos. A fighter at his own weight, a former champion, he seems more excited to face a little guy, and we're supposed to respect him for that. A guy who's only one fight into his super lightweight campaign, noticeable differences in stature and wingspan. Coming off that win over Liam Badu, a credible scalp for Richardson Hitchins, a credible opponent, then champion, then unbeaten. This feels like a step down to me, even though on paper George is a more accomplished fighter than Liam Badu was, that was at a lighter weight. Last in action in March of this year, opposite the ring, Jake Wiley, who gave him a good fight in what was George Kambosos' Matchroom debut. Now he's going straight into the Richardson Hitchins fight. And be honest, what do you think is gonna happen? This is the Devin Haney fight all over again, just at 140. What you saw in both of the Devin Haney fights, you're about to see next month in this one, just at a higher weight. But it's the same fight. Stylistically, it's going to be the same thing. Now, what marked the occasion when George fought Devin was that it was for undisputed, and both men were unbeaten going in. But after that first fight, you saw what it was, and in the second, it was really more of the same. That's what you're going to see next month on the 14th when these two guys fight. Richardson Hitchins is a pure boxer. Like Devin is a pure boxer, he's going to keep it long and loose and on the outside, use his height, use his length, use his jab. The way pure boxers often do, being cautious and careful, don't know that Richardson Hitchins will go in for the kill when so often pure boxers don't, even when they can. So while I may be a fan of the Matchroom brand and some of their fighters in their stable, I'm not a fan of this fight. It's to the point it's negligent to put it together. It's negligent to make it. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Netflix is targeting Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury and Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford's super fight, an aggressive boxing push after Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson's success. I think that most people thought initially that the fight between Terence and Canelo would land on the DAZN platform. As it stands, they want to do it on an even bigger one, and I'm not against it. As a non-pay-per-view, just like the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight was, making the fight that much more accessible to that many more people, it being that Netflix already has many more subscribers than DAZN does, and if you don't put that fight behind a paywall, if you make it available to all of those subscribers, you amplify its reach tenfold. I mean, we saw what the numbers for Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson were. Now, it helps that you had an iconoclast in Mike Tyson there, but Canelo is very popular, and Terence Crawford has his fans too, so that if you don't have to pay extra to see them, the numbers will be robust. They say that Dana White is going to be at the helm of the promotion, and like I said in my previous video, I've got mixed feelings about that because he's not a boxing promoter. This is a boxing match, not a crossover match like Conor McGregor versus Terence Crawford. This is just boxing with boxers, and I kind of feel like Dana's out of his depth when it comes to that. What is intended to service as the launch pad for the TKO brand involving him, Nick Khan, Turkey LL Sheik. They're going to use the celebrity of these two fighters to launch that brand. Other news in association with TKO.
I would just tell you that, look, we're expecting with the new boxing organization that we're launching to put on an average of, call it 12 fights a year, 12 cards a year for each of the next 5 years. We're still putting that plan together and obviously working hand in hand with our friends from Saudi. Irrespective of those, we will look to do anywhere from 1 to 4 sort of super fights per year. We'll see how that plays out. But obviously we would term the Canelo Crawford September matchup as one of those. And then on that undercard, we would have a number of those undercard fights that would likely air on the television partner, the media partner we would have for our newly formed boxing organization. And I should mention, it's not going to be called TKO Boxing. That seems like the soup of the day here. We'll be unveiling our name for our business fairly soon here. But it will not be TKO Boxing. And as you look at those are two separate businesses, right? The Saudis are funding what would be these, super fight cards. We'll work with them on media rights deals and take a commission. We'll work with them, obviously, on global partnerships. We'll work with them on ticketing. We'll handle the production. We'll look to potentially promote all of them with Dana White and Nick Khan, driving much of that. But then separately, we'll have our boxing organization, our JV with them, where we're going out and doing, as I mentioned, 12 cards a year on average, and getting a separate media rights fee, selling global partnerships through those cards, and of course, promoting and producing those cards with and on whatever media platform we ultimately choose to tie with.
12 shows per year, according to Mark Shapiro, which is already 7 more than the PBC did last year when they debuted on the Amazon platform. He says that it's not actually TKO Boxing, that's not the official name of the company, but that's what we're going to call it until further notice. There seems to be a lot we don't know, but what we do know, what has now been confirmed, is that they will be at the helm of the promotion for Canelo versus Crawford, and that in effect puts them in bed with Netflix for at least that show. Because we know that Netflix only seems to want the biggest of the big fights, the fights that have essentially already been built. All the legwork has been done, and all you need is a big enough distributor to get it out to as many people as possible. Their interest in staging live events, more specifically, live sport. At a time where reactions continue to pour in for Canelo Alvarez's last performance, who's to blame for the fight's poor aesthetic? And more specific to this conversation, how did Canelo look? Because he's about to fight Terence Crawford. Robert Garcia had some startling perspectives, startling opinions on the match.
I think this fight now with Crawford is gonna make it a better fight. I think it's a very close fight. Now I switch. I always thought Canelo was gonna be too big, too strong, but now I'm gonna pick Crawford to win this fight. Crawford is very talented, great footwork, great combinations, and a very strong fighter. He facing him off. He's actually the taller man. So I'm leaning towards Crawford now. I switch my opinion. I think Canelo looked too slow, too flat-footed, one punch at a time. I don't think that's going to be enough for him to beat Crawford. Crawford's too fast, too strong, just too good.
He's going with Terence Crawford to win, based on how Canelo looked with William's skull. Granted that William is a bigger, younger man than Terence Crawford, he's also unproven. According to Robert, Canelo looked slow, wasn't really throwing that much. I highlighted that myself, that with Canelo now, it's really only 1 or 2 punches at a time. He doesn't like to waste punches, and while what he does throw is accurate, I look at that as a sign of decline, that Canelo doesn't throw that much. His output is greatly diminished. However, if the feeling is that based on how Canelo looked with William, Terence can take a page out of William's playbook, all that's going to do is cost him a decision. You have to do more than that to beat Canelo. You have to do more than just move around and try to survive. The Williams Skull fight was not the best advertisement for Canelo Alvarez's boxing ability, though at the same time, he didn't have a dance partner in there. He didn't look good in that fight. but it's because he wasn't in one. And I don't think that Robert Garcia said what he said out of spite or some kind of rancor that he has towards Canelo Alvarez, as he was leaning towards him before this past weekend. I think he's being neutral about it, and in his professional opinion, he now likes Terence Crawford's chances a bit more. What he has working for him is that he's a little taller than Canelo, certainly has more reach, more wingspan, and he can use that while staying on his toes to get in with punches, try to get out safely, try to land some counters, but none of it speaks to his durability. How well will he take Canelo Alvarez's power if Canelo does get in with a power shot? His speed, too. He'll be fighting at a much heavier weight than he normally does. He'll be a lot heavier than what he's used to. A year removed from the sport, I can't stress that enough. In between the Israel Madrimov fight in summer of last year and the Canelo fight in September of this one, there's a year in between there, and Terence is 38. That has either worked to preserve him or slow him down, cause ring rust to collect. We won't know until the night of, when we see him in there. So I get that Canelo Alvarez looked less than spectacular in his last fight, but don't forget that Terence didn't look spectacular in his last fight either, and that was many, many months ago. The night of, over a year's time. It all matters. In men's cruiserweight news, another look at Badu Jack's successful title defense against former champion Noel Mikhailian, ending dispute over WBC cruiserweight title. Jack was patient from the outset, using his jab and feints in the early rounds before making his first big impression in the third with a right hand. Mikhailian took a cue from Badu Jack in the fourth, using right hands to the body to set up right hands to the head of his own. Mikhailian, a Miami-based native of Armenia, used his 7 years youth advantage to push the pace in the fourth, trying to back up Jack and work the body to slow the older fighter down. Just as Mikhailian began to take control of the fight, Jack came roaring back in the sixth, landing 3 straight right hands to back Mikhailian into the ropes and then hurting him later in the round with a counter right. 41 years old he's doing this against a bigger, younger fighter, lest we forget. Noel Mikhailian is a bona fide cruiserweight, whereas Badu Jack used to campaign as low as 168. An underrated fighter, Noel Mikhailian began to express doubt about his conditioning after the 7th round while conversing with his trainer, veteran Don Charles, who advised him to dig deep and protect himself better in close. Mikhailian responded with a strong 8th round, working mostly with his jab to establish range and land the clearer punches. Jack, who had previously been a WBC super middle and WBA light heavyweight champion, showed his experience as the fight progressed, dropping his head and digging to the body inside and making the fight more physical than Mikhailian would have liked. Mikhailian, who was showing signs of exhaustion, even though he was the bigger, younger man, he didn't have the bigger, better engine. The punch stats demonstrated Jack's efficiency, as he was credited with landing 122 of 369 attempts, while Mikhailian attempted about 300 more punches at 670 and landed just 31 more for a total of 153. With a win over Mikhailian on his record, Jack now turns his attention to Ryan Rositsky, who is recovering from surgery, meaning that Badu Jack has time to schedule another fight. Not just a mandated title defense against the mandatory, but perhaps against another world champion. There is Jai Opataya, there is Zurdo Ramirez. A few passing thoughts. Badu Jack, in spite of all his experience and having been a champion at 3 weights, won't struggle to get a fight, and that's due to his age. Even with his showing against Noel Mikhailian, he will still appear low-hanging fruit to the other champions at the weight. That's Zurdo Ramirez, that's Jai Opataya, who is more or less on the same schedule as Jack. Jack fought last week, and in a few weeks' time, Jai will return to action in his native Australia. Both fighters have made appearances on Turkey El Al Sheikh's shows. Jai Opataya more than once. We know he still means to become this division's undisputed champion. Zurdo Ramirez has his upcoming title defense against Uniel Dorticos. There's also him to consider. But Badu Jack's options as WBC champion are not exclusive to unification matches. There is also a fight with former champion Chris Billum Smith he might consider, because Chris is still a ticket seller. I remember the WBC mentioning not but a few months ago that they'd be willing to allow Chris Billum Smith a shot at the green and gold title. And given that Chris Billum Smith is beatable, God bless the kid, but if Zurdo Ramirez beat him, Badu Jack can beat him.
It's possible.
That's basically saying that Badu Jack has one or two more avenues to peruse besides fighting the other champions at the weight. He can make a bit of coin fighting Chris Billum Smith as a voluntary title defense.
There's also David Benavidez to consider, to a lesser extent. Now, I've never seen anything about a Benavidez versus Jack fight.
Nothing about them being in talks and nothing about them having a dialogue, but when you consider that David's already entertaining a move to cruiserweight for Zurdo, maybe he makes a pit stop and fights Badu Jack en route to Zurdo, which would make their fight a unification match. There is that to consider, that maybe they make a play to fight Badu Jack.
He's 41 years old, and you know they've got no aversion to fighting old men. Anthony Durrell, Oleksandr Vazdik.
If anything, that would make a Badu Jack fight more appealing to Team Benavidez. The real question is, can they get the money up to get Jack in the ring? Because it would be a voluntary title defense, not a mandatory. They have no leverage over him, that if you want him, you have to pay to play.
But that's another scenario to consider. A Benavidez versus Jack fight. It's really up to Badu Jack. He's in the driver's seat.
He's in control, at least momentarily, while his mandatory challenger, Ryan Rositsky, is out of commission and recovering from that injury. Badu Jack is at liberty to go in whatever direction he wants.
But he has to move fast, because as soon as Ryan Rositsky is able to fight, he's gonna want to fight, and you're going to have to satisfy him.
Let's not romanticize why Badu Jack is still fighting at 41 years old. Money has everything to do with it, and he has a very limited window of opportunity to turn that title into more money.
Some fights are more dangerous than others, some more winnable.
But the money each fight pays out will have everything to do with Badu Jack's next move. Who he decides to fight.
We'll see.